On Christmas in my town, children go missing. For the last 3 Christmases, without fail, the worst has happened. A child has gone missing. I remember it like it were yesterday. Parents used to let their kids play freely in the icy snow outside, and now it's just empty. Children can't be children. There were no Christmas trees, Christmas carols. It just became a sad holiday in my town. The first to disappear was Tommy Graham. He was 11 years old, and although I'd seen him around, I didn't really know him personally. I remember my mother crying about it. Just the thought of something terrifying happening to a child distressed her greatly. That Christmas, my dad held on to me tighter than he had ever before. The following year, another Christmas came and another child was taken. Her name was Cheryl, and she was only 4 years old. And just like Tommy the year before, little Cheryl was never found. Despite everything that was going on, it wasn't until the 3rd child disappeared that I was truly heartbroken. His name was Finn, and he was one of my friends. We lived on the same street. We would walk to school together each day. My dad used to take us to the cinema most Sundays. Finn was like part of the family, and I still think about him to this day. Where would he have been now? What would he have done in his life? What happened to my best friend? Every Christmas, children in my town go missing. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, go back and watch that. It was finally December, and my dad told me that he had a surprise for me. From behind his back, he pulled out an advent calendar. Every year, my dad got me an advent calendar. But this year, he was worried he wasn't gonna be able to find one. Most of the shops were selling out of them really quickly. Being the dad he was, he spent hours driving around town looking for one until he found one for me. And it was December 1st, which means I get to open one right now. I was excited to open it, but I couldn't help think about my friend Finn. He loved advent calendars too. I started to cry, and my dad comforted me until I fell asleep. I had completely forgotten to open the first door of the advent calendar. When I fell asleep, I began to have nightmares. It was a horrific dream about him and the other kids that went missing. The first thing I looked at was the advent calendar, with its cute little hand-drawn houses covered in snow. But almost immediately, I noticed that something wasn't quite right about the advent calendar. The door to the first night was wide open. I hadn't opened it. I climbed out of bed to get a closer look at what was behind the door. I should have just stayed in bed because what I saw next was horrifying. Christmas, children in my town go missing. Part 3, if you missed part 1, go back and watch that. The last thing I told you is that I saw the advent calendar and saw something horrifying. And I saw it, I screamed. Within just a few seconds, my dad and mom were in the room. My dad flipped on the lights and looked in the advent calendar. He assured me it was a happy Christmas scene and I had just had a nightmare. And upon taking a closer look, he was right. The picture was just of an old stone bridge covered in snow. My dad flipped off the light and I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't help but just hear Finn's voice in my head screaming, "Run." The next day I had school and it went by quickly. As I walked home, I would think of the walks I had with Finn. When I finally made it home, something felt off. I went straight to my room and to my suspicion, the next advent calendar door had been opened. I touched the yellow number 2 on the cardboard door. Behind the door should have been a treat or a happy photo. I hesitated for a second and then I looked behind it. I let out a sigh of relief as I noticed it was just a photo of a little boy pulling a red sled. There's nothing creepy in it, nothing weird, no eyes staring back at me. But what was that? There was something sitting on the red sled, and it was the same ominous figure from the night before. I rubbed my eyes because I was 9 years old and there was no way that this was actually that scary. And the figure was gone. But all I could think about was what was going to happen when I opened door number 3. Krampus actually a demon? It's officially that time of year. If you've been naughty, Krampus might be coming for you. If you've never heard of Krampus, essentially Krampus is the evil version of Santa Claus. He's a half-goat demon that is supposedly descendant of the Norse god of the underworld. They say he comes out one night in December, and you can usually hear him coming because while you hear human footsteps, you also hear the clip-clop of his hoofed feet. And when you see him, you'll notice that he's armed with birch tree branches, and his arms are strung with chains and bells. And in most histories, he carries a large sack or bag that he uses to cart off the naughty children. If the children are lucky, they'll just get the branch as a warning, but truly naughty children will be carried off in his bag. And some of the stories get even darker, alluding to the children never being seen again. The weird part about this legend is nobody is quite sure where or how this legend started, but most people believe he hails from the Alpine regions. Krampus comes from the German word Krampus, which means claw, and he also resembles the Norse god of hell. Now, a lot of people think that that's not just a coincidence. Now, Krampus is terrifying and none of us want to see him. If you're trying to avoid Krampus, go watch my next video on how to tell if he's coming. Here's everything you need to know about Krampus. I'm gonna tell you about it while we bejewel this look. I know, I look crazy, but I'm about to look crazier. If you think Christmas is all about sleigh bells and presents and gifts and Santa Claus, you would be wrong. Now buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride. We are starting all the way back at pagan traditions. In the beginning, pagan traditions of winter consisted of rambunctious merrymaking. People celebrated using considerable amounts of alcohol, and the people who were considered to be
be poor at that time, would flock to the homes of those who were more wealthy and demand food and drinks. Like, why did we stop that tradition? And if the rich did not give you food and drinks, absolute chaos would ensue. Along with these festivities came a dark creature. You guessed it, it's Krampus. Here's the thing, you don't want to get taken by Krampus. If you hear bells, that's Santa Claus. If you hear chains, that's Krampus. Now, if you're not naughty, you have nothing to worry about. But for those of us who were, one of the surefire ways to avoid being taken by Krampus, hang mistletoe. Supposedly, Krampus despises mistletoe, so lots of people will hang it on windows or doorways. Now you know, if you see mistletoe, they were naughty and they're hiding from Krampus. Number 2, while Santa loves cookies, Krampus loves hot chocolate. So if you offer him a cup of hot chocolate, he might just take you off the naughty list. And finally, number 3. He's the opposite of Santa, so he hates Christmas carols. So dance and sing to Christmas music and be merry, and you might be able to avoid Krampus altogether.